Yeah.
And we're back. It is COMP397. It's the summer 2016 semester. It's week 8, part 2 of our broadcast. We just did a bit of a crazy install about some of the stuff we did, and we're still not quite there in terms of our boilerplate. We're not quite there. Some people are installing stuff on their system, making it work. I know I apologize in advance. I know that I'm trying to make up for lost time over the last week. So, bear with me. There's still some stuff we need to do for our boilerplate before I put it up on GitHub. This is still not my initial version yet, right? So I got my boilerplate here, and I've got my files in my library, but I need to connect them into my index.html. So here's my index.html. Remember, I made some spaces for CSS and JavaScript. I need one more file. Well, I need a couple more things. One is my core.ts. And unlike Visual Studio, I can't drag and drop like this. I can't do that. I can't drag and drop my files into my index.html. That's not going to happen, right? What I need to do, especially from a scripts perspective, is create an area for my script. And there's some stuff we can do here. First, let's get my CSS going. And this is how you do the CSS piece. I want to do a link, right? And inside my style sheet, I only have one. It's inside my content. I have my game.css. And I can certainly type in content game.css. But if you want to get the path, you can right-click here. This is another trick, copy path, right? And then, Control V, and just get rid of all this other stuff that's local to me or you. And just kind of, if you're lazy, you can just do one of these. And we're going to do the same thing. Obviously, I could have typed in content, but I just wanted to show you how to do that. So that's what we're going to do for all the paths that are presented to us from Bower. Why? Because they're long to type, and you can save yourself some finger typing errors by copying the whole path and erasing stuff as opposed to putting it in from scratch. So here's one. So I need to do a script tag, right? I need to have a source for my script tag. So I'm attaching my JavaScript as part of my sources, right? Inside these quotations, I want to grab easel first. So go to easel.js first. That's the first one I want to grab. In this order, please. All right. I want to go to lib. And then I want to find easel.js-0.8.2 min.js. Right-click, copy path, right? If you're a Visual Studio person, just drag and drop. And then paste, right? And then get rid of everything before the scripts folder. So it's going to look like this. Whoop. Now, if you notice, this is, you might say, well, I could type it out. OK, go ahead, type it. I'm not typing anything. I'm just going to do the same thing for the other ones. The next one is, I just copied and pasted this one. The next one is not going to be easel. It's going to be tween. That's the second one. I'm going to go lib. I'm going to right-click on tween.js.0.6.2.mid.js. Can you say that faster? It's a tongue twister. And then just teleport that in. And then kill the scripts, anything before the scripts. So it's the second one, tween. And copy paste. Oops. Do that again. And instead of tween, now I want to do sound and then preload last. All right, so sound. I want to just grab sound.js-0.6.2.mid.js. Right-click, copy, path, and then teleport that in there. Get rid of anything before the scripts, right? And let's do the next one. So I'm going to copy this whole thing. The last one is our preload. Go to preload here. Into my lib folder, preload, js.0.6.2.min.js, right-click, copy path, and populate that in there like this. Get rid of anything below the scripts folder. And now I've got all my libraries. And now I'm going to put another little annotation here because I like putting annotations in my file, right? I want to say something like, create.js libraries. Because that's what those are. Create.js libraries. So those are the ones. So I got easel, tween, sound, and preload, right? And you notice they're all coming from that scripts lib folder that I described in my Bower RC file. My Bower RC file told Bower where to put all my stuff, right? It puts everything inside my scripts lib folder, and that's what I've attached here. Scripts lib is the path for all of my JavaScript. Now, once I have all those libraries, I could strictly do a JavaScript game without using TypeScript, because once it's attached to my HTML page and I have a canvas, right, and all that kind of stuff, I'm almost ready to go here. But of course, we want to extend our functionality with TypeScript. And so we need to use typings for this. One thing we're missing also is my core game libraries. We haven't have yet. We only have like my Create.js libraries, but I want to have my own libraries too, my own stuff we're going to build today or as we go on. So I'm going to kind of put another little annotation here, little comment that says, you know, game scripts. All our game scripts are going to live down here. So Create.js libraries here, our game scripts are here. So in our game scripts, we have one game script right now, right? It's called game.ts. Now, here's the trick. You don't want to put game.ts over here because TypeScript TS is not recognized by a browser. It's got to be game.js, right? So I'm going to right-click on game.js if you want to do that, or you can type. Let's type this one because it's not so big. Scripts, right? Core, then game.js. Notice I'm not putting the TS. I'm putting JS because it's going to be transpiled to JS. Now, there are a number of ways we can transpile from TypeScript into JavaScript. There are ways we can do it in the command line. We're going to try those out on the command line. We can also set up something called a task runner that happens inside Visual Studio Code. If you're someone who uses Visual Studio, all you need to do is save your file, and it'll transpile automatically for you into JavaScript, right? But we're going to be a little bit more advanced than that, right? Knowing that I'm going to use TypeScript and knowing that I'm going to use my TypeScript definition library, typings, right? I need to set up another configuration file here, which is tsconfig.json. So inside the root of my folder, I'm going to right-click and I'm going to do a new file in the root of my folder called tsconfig.json. tsconfig.json. This is where we're going to tell TypeScript how we're going to compile our stuff. How do I want TypeScript compiler to compile stuff? How do I want that to happen, right? So I'm going to open it up just like a regular JSON file like this, right? So I need to open up with curly braces. And I'm going to press Control Space. Control Space gives me some options. Here's one that I want to access, which is compiler options. I want to click compiler options. I'm going to show you how to do that again. So let me do that again. So if you missed that. So again, all I need to do is, I need to put these curly braces, and then if you're in Visual Studio Code, Control Space, it gives you some options automatically some code hinting comes up for tsconfig.json. And if I choose compiler options, you get this additional object here, compiler options. Here's what I want you to do. We need to describe to TypeScript, the TypeScript actual compiler, right? We need to describe to TypeScript what we're going to be compiling to, right? So we need a target. So our target right now is ES3. Let's change it to ES5. You don't want to make it ES6 because that would be the latest version. You can choose anything else. By the way, if you kind of open this up, and if I just go kind of Control Space, you can see that there's going to be other options that can come up here as options. I want to choose ECMAScript 5, ES5. Okay, comma. So target is 1. Also, I want to talk to TypeScript and tell it how do I want to modularize my system, right? Now, there's different module options. If I type module, right? Notice that it picks common.js for you. That's the module system I described earlier, where you put module, and then each module itself, it represents a module, a separate document or stuff. That's how I'm going to do my modules. Next. In the compiler, I want to talk about source maps. So source maps are going to be true. We're going to turn source maps on. The reason why we're going to turn source maps on is because I want to make sure that when the compiler looks at TypeScript stuff, it says, okay, I want to add a source map so we can do debugging in the browser. Source maps help us do debugging in the browser specifically for TypeScript, right? Otherwise, we'd always just look at the JavaScript file, which is not really descriptive. It's going to be like, we're going to look at spaghetti. We've written beautiful code, classes and everything else, and then here's JavaScript. And it's like, whoa, this isn't what I wrote. No, it isn't. It's the emitted JavaScript, right? That's how it's looking. And so we use source maps to help us with that. So that means every time we compile stuff with TypeScript, we create a source map, right, in JavaScript. We'll talk about that in a sec. Okay? Here's something else. Notice that we have compiler options. If I put comma, right, and press Control Space, I can also choose a couple of other things. One of them is exclude, right? Let's press exclude. And what I want to do is I want to exclude, anything that has to do with, these are paths. This is an array of stuff I can exclude. What I don't want to do is I want to have nothing to do with my scripts lib. I don't want to recompile scripts lib. So scripts lib, put that in there. So I want to exclude, I don't want to compile or try to transpile anything in my scripts lib. And just in case we use npm for any reason, any node modules, we don't have anything like that, but we want to put node modules in there too. So node_modules. We don't want to put any of that. So we want to ignore, I'm ignoring scripts lib and node modules. I don't want to compile stuff from there. All right? Just in case. We can include other things in there too. But for now, that's pretty good. Right? So again, what is tsconfig.json? If I was ever going to quiz you, tsconfig.json is a configuration file for TypeScript compilation. It tells TypeScript how to compile and emit what type of JavaScript you want to emit, how your modules are going to be set up in your file. For example, System.js is a very popular module system. We can use System.js to bundle our modules together and so on. We're not going to do that right now. We might do it later. But we want to make sure that when we describe to TypeScript how we transpile everything from TypeScript into JavaScript. Okay, cool. Let's do a little bit of TypeScript, and then I'm going to put it out to GitHub so you can see what I got. All right? Let's do that first. So here in my core, game.ts, right? I mean, it's got to know where to go, right? Game.ts, luckily, is being accessed in here in my index.html, but it's called game.js. So I need to transpile it. Well, let's write something first. Let's call this something. So in my game.js, I want to make an initialization or a init function. So let's do that. So I'll say function. This is pure JavaScript. Init. Right? Because we're doing TypeScript, we can say that this function returns void. Right? This function it's not returning anything. Right? And in my init function, what I want to do is something like console.log, like hello world, or game started. How about that? Game started. Yay. Right? I want to kind of check to see that it started. All right, I want to transpile this. There's a couple ways we can do this. But let's do the command line version first. All right, so I want to do pure command line. In order for you to use command line, let's go back. I'm going to close this off. Again, you can right-click here and go open in terminal or open command prompt. If you have that open already, you're good. Right? One thing we need to do is install TypeScript. And on the command line, you have to do something like this: npm install TypeScript -g. If you don't do that, then TypeScript's not installed in your system, and then it won't work. Okay? By the way, if you want hinting as to where to go to get that information, right, for TypeScript, go to typescriptlang.org again. Here's typescriptlang.org. And if you look down under documentation on how to install TypeScript, you can see that there's npm install -g TypeScript. You need to be able to do this. And the command to compile is tsc. tsc, and then hello world, whatever you want to call it, right? If you want to specifically name a file. Take a look. It actually uses Visual Studio Code as an example of how to do stuff. So there's some really good examples down here on the site. And this is a great source of information for you on how to do stuff. Notice that there's different support for different IDEs and text editors over here, right, on how to make things work. So you need to do this first before you can make it work. So if npm and node isn't working on your system, then you can't do TypeScript. You can't transpile. That's a bad thing. That's why I say if you have trouble with your system in front of you, use Cloud9, because you can do an npm install TypeScript on Cloud9. You'll be okay, right? Okay. Let's go back. So I've got my prompt here, and I want to do it just like that. I want to say kind of, if I just put tsc, right, tsc, and I press enter, right, it's going to kind of look through my files, right, and let's take a look what it is. Just kind of enter tsc, right, like that. tsc. And if I go back to my files, so if I go back to here, and look, it compiled everything, right, automatically. I'm in my folder, so here's my folder, right, inside the folder that my project is in. Just by typing tsc on the command line, bam, it just transpiled everything. If you notice, it's identical, right? Because there's nothing. But notice that I also point to a source map. Here's what my source map looks like. right? It doesn't make any sense to you. Don't worry about it, right? The only thing you care about is this JS file. This is what the JS file looks like, right? So how did I get that? TSC. But that's kind of a pain. Imagine if you had to do that every time, right? It's kind of a pain in the ass, right? Let's write some more interesting code. So this is cool. Let's test it on the browser. Here's a really cool NPM module that you can test. If you want a local server that runs on your command prompt, I highly recommend downloading and installing something called Light Server, Light-Server. So if you go to npm Light-Server, that's another tool you can download. And you need npm and node to install it, right? So this is how you install it, npm install Light-Server. And I recommend using it globally, -G, with the -G option, like this, right? Now, this is cool, right? What this is going to do for us is when I go here, and if I do npm install, Light-Server -G, right? Globally, it'll install everything. Then I can do something like this, Light-Server inside the same folder as my project. It's going to look for index.html and launch a small server, right? That's right here. It's equivalent to something like a MAMP server. It's a small node server that's running in the background. And then if you notice, if I inspect, if I did everything correctly, then I should see something. But oh, alas, I do not. Why don't I see everything here? Well, I described my function in it, but I never called the function in it, right? I never called this thing, right? Here's my function in it. I need to call it. Well, here's something that I recommend. You can do something like, window.add event listener, and then, we're listening for the load event for the window, and then we're going to call the init function. Now that is cool. And if now that I've saved, because I'm using Light Server, bam, it should automatically update things. We should be good to go. Yeah? Well, no. Why didn't it update? Because we didn't transpile. Right? So I got to stop this for a second. I got to transpile, right? So clear. And I got to transpile this. So I'm going to say TSC, enter, right? Okay, it transpiled now. Now let's write Light Server again. Oh man. And let's look at the inspector there. And do I have game started? Yes, I do. So game started is working, right? So what happened there? Why did I have a problem? I had a problem because there's a bunch of stuff going on. I have to always transpile my code, which is pretty ugly, right? And I got to remember to do that, right? Well, what if I can watch to see if anything changes, right? I can watch to see if anything changes, and then it'll transpile for me. That's better, right? Well, there's a way to do that, right? So I need two windows, though. One of them for my TypeScript, which I can call. So if I go clear, you can use the command tsc -w for watch, right? What it's going to do, it's going to watch my files for any changes, right? And then I need to run my server at the same time. So I'm going to go back here, and I'll launch another window. Here's a second window, right? And I'm going to say, Light-Server. And now what it'll do, so I'm going to kill these. Now what it'll do is if I inspect, you can see that my console says game started. Now, here's something that's interesting. If I go over here and if I change my TypeScript file, notice the console here, and this is my live site, right? If I change something over here, game started now, and save, all of a sudden, bam, game started now. So it transpiled and updated my web page right away, right? That's a better workflow than kind of doing everything, by hand, going through things, and yeah. But I want to give you one other better. If you can do it this way, okay? So if you're a Cloud9 person, you would do it like this, right? That's the easiest way to do it because you don't have a task runner like I'm going to show you. But if you're a Visual Studio Code person, right? You can create a task runner. If you're a Visual Studio person, you're done. You're already done. We don't have to talk because it's already done for you, right? Once you save, Visual Studio will just transpile automatically, and you're good. You don't have to even monkey with a tsconfig file. You can make a tsconfig.json file in Visual Studio as well, but you don't have to. Okay. Let me show you what I'm talking about. So let's stop those things, those processes. One, here's my server. I got to stop that, right? And then I can go back to my watch task and stop that, right? So how do I incorporate a watch task or some kind of task runner in Visual Studio, or Visual Studio Code, I mean? Well, it's incorporated. I'm going to show you how to do that. So on the Mac, it's Command-Shift-B. Command-Shift-B on the Mac, right? On the Windows machines, it's Control-Shift-B, right? So Control-Shift-B or Command-Shift-B. It's going to pull up this thing that says, hey, configure a task runner, all right? So Command-Shift-B or Control-Shift-B on Windows, right? It's going to bring up this little task runner. For those people who are going to watch the video later on, it's okay, right? If I click on Command, Configure Task Runner, right, it tells me what kind of task runner do you want me to configure. How about Gulp? I can do Gulp, Grunt. It's all built in. .NET Core. These are all things that are built in now, and you can actually add in other ones, right? What I want is this tsconfig.json task runner. TypeScript tsconfig.json, that's the one I want. Notice another one that's TypeScript watch mode. Compiles a TypeScript project in watch mode, right? Let's take a look at both. So here's tsconfig.json, right? And what it does is it says, hey, take a look at tsconfig.json, which is this one, to tell me how to compile everything, right? And leaving everything as is, just like this, right? It's pre-configured my task runner to compile everything. Okay, this is what it should look like for you. I'm going to save this thing. And notice it puts it in a special folder in your project called .vscode. And there's the task runner. Task.json is where it puts it in. All right, this is my task runner. Okay, now for me to transpile, I can do it like this. So let's say I have a file here, and let's say I want to add some more complexity to this file. Like, for example, let's say I want some additional things, like a class, like we talked about before. Let me add that class back into that person class. Right, so I'll go person. Actually, you know what? The great thing is that it gets continuously to run this thing. I can go to typescriptlang.org, and luckily, because I was in my playground, it'll remember all this stuff. It won't forget about it. So I'll grab this whole class here like this. Actually, I'll grab all that stuff, copy it. You can go if you did this on playgrounds, you can kind of grab this, and I can go back into VS Code, right? And I can paste it. Okay, there it is. Okay, and if I save it, it's not transpiled, right? If I look at JavaScript, it looks like this. Here's my TypeScript, it looks like this, right? But if I press Command-Shift-B now, right, this little button will run in the background, and if I go back to JavaScript, now it's transpiled. You can see the transpiled version. In fact, if you want to see both at the same time, you can do a split screen by clicking the little split screen button, right? And you can direct yourself to look at different ones. So this one will be the TypeScript version, and this one will be the JavaScript version, and you can see both. If you really want to. I don't recommend it. Too much clutter for you. And in my little screen, it's too much clutter, right? But if you really want to see both, you could, right? So you can make this like minimize, like over here, and you can pull this over and see what does the JavaScript look like when it gets emitted. This is what it looks like right here, right? Okay, cool. So I have to press Command-Shift-B to do that, right? That's kind of, man, I don't like that, right? I want it to happen automatically. I want my stuff when I'm pawn save. I want this thing to transpile. So how do I fix that stuff? So let's just undo that stuff. So I'll undo, right? And I'll transpile again to get rid of it. Command-Shift-B. So it's going to be gone, right? There it is. And what I want to do here is I want to kill my task runner. I want to kill this whole directory, this .vscode directory here. Just destroy it for a second. Just bear with me. And I want to do that again. Just want to kind of configure my task runner one more time. So I'm going to kind of save everything, my project, then Command-Shift-B. It's going to bring up my task runner, configure my task runner. And let's look what the other one looks like, right? So here's my TypeScript watch mode task runner, right? What this does is it gives me the exact same task runner as before, right? But what it also adds in is watch, TSC watch, right? So now when I can, if I figure, you might figure that, you might be forgiven to think, by the way, that if I kind of drag and drop this stuff in here, like the stuff I had before, right, and press save, that it'll transpile automatically. Well, no, it doesn't. You have to initialize it the first time by Command-Shift-B, right? So here's Command-Shift-B, right? And notice it transpiled, but if I undo it, so if I undo this change, save it, right, it automatically transpiles again. So that's good. That's what I want. Every time I save, it transpiles everything automatically because I have a watch task that's built into my transpiler. So that way, just like Visual Studio, if I save my stuff, it transpiles. Now we're at the same space. And if you do this with Cloud9, you can do it with Cloud9. You can do it with Visual Studio. It does everything for you. Let's put that back. Save. Bam. Right? I want that functionality. As soon as I save, transpiles all my files from TypeScript to JavaScript. Okay. Undo. All right, so I've got my little thing here. I've got my game started now, right? I've got the ability for me to transpile. I can also, like I said before, I can set up my little server, right, which is this little server to watch everything. I want to do that. And again, to start the server, because I downloaded light-server, I can initialize it, and I can run this server in the background, which automatically updates. And if I go to my inspector, I can see on my console that game started now, right? So I'm ready to go. Okay, this is a great space to start my initial commit, because I got a project that's kind of working now, right? And I think this is a great space to stop and put up on GitHub so you guys can download it or look at it and compare my code with yours, all right? Because we're going to get heavy duty with code, and in order for you to catch up, I'm going to continue at this breakneck pace, and you're going to have to look at it and say, hold on, let's take a look at that code. What did he do differently than me? How come his worked and mine didn't, right? Okay, how do I do that? Well, I've got this thing running in the background. Let's open up another terminal window, right? So I'm going to go back to here, or command prompt, right? And in here, I want to, as long as you have git initialized, and again, you have to install git. That was another requirement, right? You do git init. I'm initializing git. And I'm going to say git add dot, which is going to basically add everything to git. Then git commit minus m, initial commit. Okay, what is this git thing I'm talking about anyway? Git, for those people who don't know, is a version control system. And in your next iteration, not this assignment, not assignment 3, but assignment 4, the one I put up on GitHub or on Dropbox already, you're going to need to use git, and you're going to need to provide or produce your site live somewhere, right? Those are 2 requirements. If you use if you use Azure, Microsoft Azure in Git, it's always going to be worth 8 marks out of your project, right? Just putting it up on Git, updating your Git repository regularly, and throwing it up on Azure, you're going to be golden. You're going to get some marks from that, and you're halfway there producing a live site. So what is Git? Git is a command line tool, but GitHub is its companion. GitHub, like I said before, is the cloud service that you can connect with your local Git repository. You make a local Git repository on your files locally, right? So when I do git init, if I do git init, this part here, what it does is it creates an invisible .git folder. And that's where your repository is being stored. It actually takes a copy of all the files you add in and puts it in a list and says, hey, all of these files are in my repo. And it keeps track of any of your changes. How many people have I've asked this question before, people have had me before, but how many people have actually worked on a project, you're working along, you're chugging along, you're typing stuff in, and then all of a sudden, oh man, it broke. And you don't know where it broke, right? I've asked that question before, right? It happened to me all the time, right? I don't know where the hell I broke it, right? So I want to back up. Well, Git allows you to do things like go back to a previous version, right? So it's version control built in. It's a backup built in, and it's a great tool like we're going to see right now for collaboration. I'm collaborating with you. I'm sharing my code with you, right? Live, so you can see it. So I need to do these things. The first thing is git init. Second thing is git add dot. Dot means add everything, right? Git, remember this, the same kind of functionality. Git is the program. Init is the verb to do something. So initialize my Git repository. Git add everything to my Git repository. Git commit. Commit is a snapshot. Think about it as a snapshot. I'm taking a snapshot of my files, and M for message, minus M says, hey, what message do I want to attach to my snapshot? It's going to be called initial commit, this initial commit right here. Typically, we use 2 things, initial commit or first commit. Those are the 2 things we use as a convention. You can make it whatever you want, though. And now I'm going to press enter. So what it does, it takes all those files and adds it into my local repository, right? So I haven't connected it to GitHub. All I've done is created a local repository. Let me show you where it is. I do ls on the Windows machine is dir minus al for Mac, because I want to see all. Take a look. I have this hidden .git folder. By the way, you can see this in your Windows machine as well. This is where my repository lives, in the .git folder. If I want to kill my repository and do it again, I can remove my .git folder, and there's no more repository. It's gone, right? So if you ever have a problem with Git, what do? You remove it like this. If you're a Mac user, you can do something like this: rm remove minus rf for force. Please don't do remove minus rf star dot star. Okay, that would be bad. Bad. Don't do that. Right? I'm just saying. If you're especially a Linux person, don't do that. But you know, it might still cough up. It might say, "You sure, Aaron?" You know, and it still might kill you. You know, but you can certainly do .git, right? And then what it's going to do is it's going to kill. There's no more Git now. I can do all that stuff again, right? If you're a Windows user, you have to be able to see. You can show hidden files and folders in your Windows on your inside Windows and in Control Panel. You can enable to see hidden files and folders, and when you can do that, you just right-click on that .git folder and wipe it out, and that's gone, and you can start over again if you ever have a problem. Okay, let's do that whole thing again. So just to show you one more time. So I'm going to step up. So I'm going to say git init, and then I'm going to go back up to git add dot. So it's going to add everything in, and then a couple more steps. Right? Git commit minus m initial commit. It adds my initial commit. Right? Now locally I'm up to date, and if you notice, even on VS Code shows that I've got no changes. Notice this is the little Git symbol that's built into VS Code. It keeps track of all your changes. But for the first time, what I like to do is not use this, but rather do the command stuff, connect it to my remote cloud service, GitHub, right? And once I've connected it to GitHub, I can manage everything through Visual Studio Code, and I don't have to do this anymore. Let's show you how to do that. Let's go to GitHub. Here's GitHub. I want to make a new repository, so I'm going to click again. You have to be logged in and signed up with GitHub in order for you to do this. By the way, we would have spent at least a couple of days in the first 7 weeks doing this a couple times. If this is your first time, I apologize. Like I said, you're in the deep end, right? So plus, after you've signed in for GitHub, I'm going to go new repository. And instead of under me, I have a few accounts. One of them is Centennial, right? And I'm going to put inside Centennial, I'm going to say COMP397, summer 2016. That's like we called it before, lesson 8. Okay, cool. I'm going to create my repository. Guess what? It gives you like exactly what to do when you create your repository. Here's all the stuff we just did, right, with some extras. One thing I don't want to do is don't create a README file. You don't need that for now. Let's do that after, okay? But here, notice it says, first commit or initial commit. But these two lines here are really important. If I just grab these two lines, I can certainly type them, git remote add origin and blah, 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 right? But why? I just grab these two lines. By the way, this works exactly the same way in Windows. Copy, go back to terminal or command prompt, and then paste, right? Yeah, paste, and press enter. What it does is if you've logged in and if you saved your credentials, it's going to log in and throw everything up on Git. Now, there's a whole thing about saving your credentials without it asking you to log in every single time. And I want you to look at something like saving your credentials for Git on terminal or command prompt. There's some, if you Google it, it'll tell you what to do. There's a series of steps to make so that it kind of remembers you, so you don't have to sit there and go, here's my Git account, studiopoulos@hotmail.com, and then what's my password, blah, 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 and then log in. You have to do that every single time you do an update, which is a pain in the ass. So find out a way. There's some really good tools online on how to fix that so it remembers who you are. All right? Now that I've done that, if I refresh my GitHub up online, you can see that this is where. So I invite you to go check it out. If yours is different than mine, take a look at this site. So Centennial College, so github.com/Centennial College/COMP397, summer 2016, lesson 8. That's how all of my files are going to look like from now on. Right? So if I want to look at my code, I can go to scripts, and I can go to core, and I can go to game.ts, and there it is. It's all up online. Well, now that we're here, right, this is the beautiful thing about this. Now that we got ourselves up on Git, I can do a couple things. I can mirror my Git account in Cloud9. I can actually work on the same exact repository with Cloud9, right? If you forgot your laptop, or let's say your laptop's not working properly, whatever, you can launch Cloud9 really quickly. Here's Cloud9. And I want to sign into Cloud9, right? Here I am. And I want to mirror, I want to add another workspace. Here's my other workspace, right? And I can choose, choose a workspace from a project that I already have, right? So example, I want to, choose a Git repository. And it tells you it's a private workspace. I can clone from a Git or Mercurial optional. All I have to do is type in the Git repository right here, right? Well, where is that Git repository? Well, if I go back to Git, you can see that this is the Git repository right here, right? So copy this. Right? Oh, maybe we go back here. How about that? Copy this. Right? There we are. And I'm going to go back to Cloud9. Paste in there. Right? .git. Press enter. Right? And if I create my workspace, oh, well, my project name is important, right? Your project name is right here. I'm going to call it the same thing. So COMP397, summer 2016. You can call it something else, lesson 8, right? I don't want a short description. I want to use this and create. Oh. That's my fault because I'm not following the rules, right? And lowercase letters. See, I'm telling you, it's all the new standards, right? COMP397, summer 2016, lesson 8, right? Okay. I'm going to go out there and grab everything, right, from my GitHub repository, right, which is exactly what I just put up there, and it's creating the container, right? So if you forgot your laptop or whatever, or you can't get it to work because it's too much configuration and it's giving you a headache, right? Cloud9 is your answer, right? But it takes a moment for you to create your container, and what it's actually doing is creating a VM with a Ubuntu, little piece of console right here. Give it a second while it's doing that. But notice that it's exactly the same. Take a look. So if I do ls, here I'm on live on Cloud9. There it is. And notice that I can't do a task runner, right? One thing I cannot do, because even though I have a .vs Code, VS Code works only on Visual Studio Code. It doesn't do a task runner. It doesn't auto-compile my stuff, right? On VS Code here, right? It won't auto-compile. I need to use TSC minus W for a watch task, right? But I can't do that. If you notice, if my scripts, here's my scripts. If I go to core, it's the exact same scripts as I had before. I double click, here it is, right? And I can even run it. If you follow there's some really cool directions on how to do that. You can create a runner, task runner, and what it'll do is it'll actually run it in another browser window, right? I'm not going to go and talk about Cloud9 too much today because it's not about that. I just want to show you that there's another way of, when we're in class together, if you want to practice, and if you can't get your stuff working, use Cloud9, all right? It's not going to hurt you, and you can always go back home and configure your system to work optimally, and it's going to be okay, right? Like an example is, well, I want to make sure that TypeScript is installed. So do I have TypeScript? So TypeScript minus V, right? Well, yeah, 1.8 is already installed. Is there anything to install? No. How about Bower? Okay. Bower's not installed, okay? So I want to install Bower. npm install Bower, okay? Minus save. Well, yes. Minus G, sorry. Right? So it's going to be global for this little VM. So it's going to go out. It's going to use the local npm. It's going to grab Bower, and it's going to install it on my VM on Cloud9, right? I don't have to search for it. It has built-in Git. It has built-in Heroku tool belt. It has built-in a bunch of stuff. I'm going to let it do its thing. It's going to do it remotely, and I don't have to worry about it. Okay? So I just wanted to show you how this works. There it is. Bower is downloading, and you can see how it's kind of installing stuff for Bower. Now, if I go Bower minus V, you can see that Bower is at 1.7.9, right? So Bower is installed right now. TSC is already installed at 1.8. I could upgrade TSC by doing TSC npm install TypeScript. I could do that, right? I don't have to because this is cool. So I've got Bower. I've got npm. I could even do light server. So if I go npm install light-server minus G, right? So I can do that too. Goes out to the web, grabs light server with npm, downloads it, installs it, right? And again, there's very little to do, but you've got a little, Ubuntu window here that does everything for you, right? It's going to do its thing. And if there's something that fails, one of the things that is a negative about the cloud service is it uses an older version of Node, right? Just saying, right? So that's one thing that's negative. I mean, it can't be everything positive for free. It's free, right? It's not like you're not paying for anything and you're getting something that works, which is pretty cool. You can do most of the stuff that we're going to be doing here today on the cloud. There's going to be some stuff that you can't do, right? That doesn't work as well, like transpiling with Command-Shift-B, Control-Shift-B. It's only for Visual Studio Code. But you can do a task runner. You can do a TSC minus W, and you can create as many of these windows as you want, right? So I can click this plus button, and I can add additional windows in here, little terminal windows that pop up, and I can do other things with it at the same time. So I'll let this thing run. All right, that's one thing. Let's put it up on Azure. I talked about Azure. I want to put my site live so you guys can see it. So I'm going to go to portal.azure.com, and if you're signed up to Azure, this is the other piece that I was talking about before. Here's Azure, right? For Azure, when you're signed up, it's going to look like this. All right, this is the new portal. I want to create a new web and mobile site, right? New site. It's going to be a new web app, right? For Azure. So all I've done is type new. Let's do that again. Web and mobile. And if you have to be signed up with your DreamSpark account, please do not. If you've signed up with a credit card, you did something wrong. Okay? This is no credit card required. This is free for all students across all colleges and universities. I think even K-8 in Ontario, right? You don't need anything. You don't need anything crazy. As long as your institution is signed up, you're good to go, pretty much. If I click web app, I need to give a unique name that's across all Azure websites. So of course, I'm going to call it something like COMP, 397 summer 2016. Just make it unique. Dash lesson 8, right? I'm going to choose one of my existing services. You can also configure a service. I'm choosing one called Canada East, right? As an example, you can configure a new one. If I click new, create new, I can see that there's a bunch of different services. You want to choose the free plan. Please don't choose a plan that you have to pay. That doesn't make any sense. But I want to choose an existing service that I've already created called Canada East. We're going to go more into Azure another time. I don't have time today. And then I'm going to pin this to dashboard and click create. Once I've done that with Azure, what it's going to do is way over here is it's deploying a container that I'm going to hold my web application. That's all it's doing. So there is no container right now. It doesn't do anything. Once I've created this little web app, it's empty, right? But I want to connect it to GitHub so I have continuous deployment. So as soon as I update GitHub, bam, my website's updated. So you can always see my changes, right? How do I do that? Well, here's my website, COMP397, summer 2016, lesson 8, azurewebsites.net, right? That's the website. But right now, if I click onto it, I get this. Hey, you created your web app, but it's empty, okay? But that's ugly. I want to do something. So I want to go on to the right where my settings are. And if I scroll down where it says publishing, there's a place called deployment source. Here's deployment source. And if I click onto this, and if I choose GitHub as my deployment source, right? This is the beauty that I'm trying to get you guys to, right? And if I go down to my repository name, Centennial College, right? And if I choose my project, it's going to be the latest project, this one, COMP397, summer 2016, lesson 8, right? Here it is. And nothing else. I don't choose anything else. I keep the master branch for now. Everything else is the same. And press OK. It's going to go out to GitHub, grab the files from GitHub that I put up, transfer them to Azure, right? And you're going to have a continuous deployment workflow, right? Which means I make a change to GitHub, automatically it's reflected on my website that's live everywhere in the world right now, right? So first of all, I'd like to check to make sure that it's there. And one thing is I don't trust Azure until I see this little check mark. If there's no little check mark there, that means the deployment's not done. So please wait. Sometimes it takes a few minutes, right? But once it's done, and if I've configured everything correctly, and if my index.html is front-facing, so it's not inside another folder, which is inside another folder, which is not inside another folder. If you've done one of those, it'll never work. It has to be, your index.html has to be exposed, right? For non-ASP.NET kind of websites. ASP.NET, it'll work because Microsoft understands Microsoft. But I'm making a site, oh, I got the check mark. Now if I click on this little link here, right, I should see nothing. Why? Because I don't have anything on my page, but I should see on the console, game started now. So now it's working. I've actually deployed my little web app, it's a little very, very tiny, tiny app, to the web. It's up online. It's working everywhere in the world, right, on azurewebsites.net. Okay, you can go to that right now. Go check it out yourself. COMP397-summer 2016, lesson 8, azurewebsites.net. And that's why I want you guys to get Azure. It's free. It gives you a free database. It gives you you can host as many or very many web apps as you like. For this whole course, we're going to have one assignment after the other, right, that you're going to deploy. And if we do an exam, it's going to be up on Azure. Worst case scenario, I will allow you, because of the time frame we have, to deploy on the poor school server, worst case scenario, right? But I don't recommend. I think it's a great opportunity for you to learn a cloud service like Azure. It's not required, but it's good for you to know. Okay, cool. So I've got this. I'm good. Everything's golden, but it doesn't really show me what I've been doing. I've been trying to set up this like Create.js website all this time, and I've been telling you all these different technologies to get you going, right? Hey, by the way, let's check out what's going on here. Hey, look, it installed by Light Server, right? So if I go clear, right? So my Ubuntu server, and if I go site, it might not work. Light-server may not work. I'm just saying, right? It's going to try and deploy it, right, and see what happens, right? It's watching files, but it says, hey, here's our external, our localhost 3000, but here's our external IP. Take a look at this, right? So if I kind of click on this thing and open it, right, maybe, but maybe, right, it'll run. Let's see. Sometimes it'll run. I mean, we are trying to make it work on Cloud9. It's a free service. It may not work like this, just FYI. I guess trying to get to it, and it's not working, right? But that's okay, because it has a little task runner inside here as well. Let's kill this thing. It's got a little UI external. I wonder if this is the one. But you can look. You can kind of set up a new task runner. If you go run, right, you can set up a path where it sets up a. It says, you know, you have to kind of, if you look it up how to do it, you can set up a little window that pops up that runs perfectly within Cloud9. It's not for Cloud9. I just wanted to show you it so you can see that's an option, right? But this is what we're really concerned of. This one and this one, right? The game started now stuff, right? All right, I've got a canvas. I want to color my canvas so I can see it, right? CSS. I'm going to use CSS for that, right? The easiest way to do that, of course, is to go into my CSS. It's my project. I'm going to go into my CSS, game.css, and inside here, I want to target. Oops. I want to target my canvas element. So I'm going to say all canvas elements from now on my site. Well, guess what's going to happen? They're all going to have a border, right, of 1 pixel solid black. There we go. All right, so 1 pixel solid black. So my canvas is going to have 1 pixel solid black. And you know what? Here it is, right? Because guess what? It's watching, right? It's already running. My little server's running. So this is what my canvas would look like. This is where my game is going to happen, guys and girls, right here. Notice I got a bit of a space over here and a space over here. How come I got those spaces, right? Because I've got the dreaded browser default styles that are already running, which means, and you've seen this before because I've seen it in some of your projects already, I need a reset.css, right? Let's get that. So reset.css. So reset.css, reset CSS, right? You can use reset. There's also a normalize. Both work okay. meyerweb.com. I mean, you guys have seen this before. I want to just grab this reset.css, right? Here it is. Copy. And what I want to do is set up another CSS that's inside my content. So I'm going to right-click on my content, new file. I call this reset.css. I'm kind of paste that in there. There we are. There's my reset. And what I need to do is kind of connect this reset CSS with my index.html. So in here, on the top of my file, let's get rid of this. Before my game.css, not after, right? Because if I put it after, it's going to wipe my game out, right? I don't want that. I want to put a link, and it's going to go to content, and then reset.css. Now I'm going to save, and if I go back to my site, you can see that there is no border anymore. It's gone. Right, so all those default styles that came with my website, bye-bye. Why? It's way better this way because I have control what's happening with my site. I don't want my default styles that are built into my website because that means everyone's browser is going to be different. If I'm on Opera, maybe I'm going to get a different style. If I'm on Safari, I'm going to get a different style. I don't want those things to come into play, so I wipe them out. Okay. Now I want to move this thing, right? So it's in the middle somewhere, right? A couple ways to do that. I can use CSS again, right? Let's try this out. So how do I move it in? First of all, I want to kind of, my canvas is kind of sitting where it is right now, but I want to kind of put it so that it's inside of a div tag, right? Div tag is just a container tag. And then what I can do is I can kind of align my div tag so it's the size of the screen. Let's try to do that. So let's, in my index.html, let's put my canvas in a div tag. So I'm kind of go do div. And we'll take my canvas tag like this and kind of cut it out of here and put it into there. Maybe we're gonna kind of put a div with a class of container. Okay, for now we don't have any bootstrap in there, so that's okay. So that's my div tag, and now notice that nothing's changed here. But if I go and inspect the page, if I go to sources, right, and if I go to my index.html, you can see that now my div tag and my canvas are all in there, right? I went to sources to do that. Here's my console again. So that's one thing. Now what I want to do is I want to say, well, my div tag, I want my canvas to swim inside of this. I want to have the margins for my canvas are, zero auto, right? Up and down, auto on the left and right, right? That would be the easiest way to do it, but there's a problem, right? We're going to see what the problem is. And this course is not a CSS course, but we have to kind of understand what's going on, right? So now, is it my canvas that I want to do? Because my div tag takes the whole space, right? It's 100%. My width is 100% for my div tag. Let's try that out. So my div tag is called container, so my class of container. And my width is equal to 100%, right? And what I want to do with my canvas is I want to swim inside my div tag. So I'm going to put like a margin of like 0 auto, right? And I don't want to change my width or anything like that because I have a width of 640 by 480. I don't want to try to change that. Let's see what it does. Does it do anything? No, right? Well, why didn't it do anything? Well, because it's 0 auto, but I don't know how big the width is, right? I don't have a sense of how big my screen is. And even though I said 100%, what does it do, right? So any suggestions how to fix this thing? Okay, width is equal to my container or which one am I setting? My container or, okay, but that means that if it's on different size screens that it's going to, kind of shift around, right? I could make my div display block, but what is that going to fix it? Check it out for yourself, right? It won't fix it. For now, let's leave it alone. We want to fix this problem. It's not a big deal. One thing I do want to have is my background for my screen. Let's make it a kind of a light gray. So how do I do? Say that again? Canvas display block, sure. Display block. Let's see if that fixed it, Aaron. Yeah, did. Right, so it's nice and centered now, right? And I want my background for my body tag. So my body tag itself as a default. So my body tag has a background color. Someone's calling me of light gray. And we're gonna deny this call. I love you, wife. Okay. And if I do that, you can see that this is good. I've got a background, but it also colors my canvas. So of course, I want to put my default canvas color, right? So background dash color, and we'll make this equal to white, right? So white. There we go. All right, so that's what it looks like. See how fast it popped up because I'm watching, right? The website, the web browser is actually connected. It's auto synced with my Visual Studio because I'm using Light Server, right? Light Server is serving that functionality up. It's updating what I'm doing on the web. Okay. Cool. So I got my thing. How about a border radius? I want to make it rounded corners, just to be different, right? So border radius, right? 5 pixels. Border dash radius 5 pixels. 5 pixels. There we go. Oh, I killed it. What did I do wrong? Oh, how about a semicolon? Okay. Border radius, a little bit of rounded corners there, make it look a little nicer. This is where my screen is going to be, right? So I've kind of set together my screen, my magic. This is the place. This is where everything's going to happen. Okay, in order for me to use Create.js now, so I want to use my Create.js, I want to get typings in there. Remember we talked about typings? And we're running out of time, so I'm going to try and get this all done to get this all going, and then talk about assignment number 3. When that's going to be due, I'm going to reset the assignment due date and tell you how to do it a little bit quickly. But what I want to do here is get my typing support for my Create.js, or else we did all this for nothing, right? So how do I use typings? Well, first of all, it's a command line prompt. I got to go npm install minus typings minus g, right? You can do that. I've already done that piece. And what I want to do with typings is I want to search for the stuff I want to add in. So I'm going to say something like typings. And if you don't know what it is, you can go help. Or again, for typings, you can see the commands, right? So I know I can do a search for typings like I did with my Bower, right? So I can go typings, search, and I want to install easel.js, right? So typings install, and then it's kind of going. Oh, look. It says update available for typings. Am I going to update now? Absolutely not, right? It's going to break me. So I'm not going to do that right now. So I told you typings, and it says, hey, no results for the search, right? How come I didn't do that, right? How come I couldn't find easel.js? Oh, I typed it wrong, How about that? So let's just put in easel and then type it in. And it says it found it. It says easel.js was found with DT. That means I need to use when I install it, the DT tilde, and then easel.js is how I install it. So let's show what I'm talking about here. When I install typings, it's going to be like this: typings install and easel.js. So it's definitely typed DT tilde, right? Easel.js, right? And what I want to do is I want to say minus G, capital G, minus S, right? What this is going to do is it's going to install typings, the global type definition library for typings, and it's going to save it into my typings.json file, right? Let's try this out. If I did it right, yay, right? Now, if you notice what it did, it created another typings folder. Here's my typings folder. Here's my typings folder right here with globals, and I have easel.js in there. But I also have something else called an index.d.ts, which gives me my reference path for my typings, index.d.ts, right? Okay, let's keep that in mind. Let's do the other ones. I need easel, I need tween, I need sound, and I need preload, right? So those are all the type definition libraries I need. Let's try this out. So clear. And I'm going to assume they're all the same. Let's just make assumptions. Maybe I'm wrong, right? But who knows, right? Typings, install, and then it's dt tilde, right? Tween, JS, dt tilde, right? Sound, JS, dt tilde, preload, JS, minus G, minus S. If I'm wrong, it'll give me the answers. It'll say, right? It'll complain, but I'm not wrong, right? See how fast that was? Boom, 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 right? I've got all my type definition libraries inside my typings folder. Hey, this is a great place to do an update, just in case you couldn't do what I did. And take a look here in my Visual Studio Code. I have all the files that I just changed, right? So here's my GitHub or my local Git repository. I'm going to say added typings or type definition TSD files or support. How about support for CreateJS? I am missing something. I got to say, there's something that I am missing. I got to put it out there to you guys. I click on this little check mark. It does the local update. So I've updated. I did my local commit. And if I click on these ellipses here in Visual Studio Code, I can push my files up to GitHub automatically. So I don't have to do command line stuff again. It's done. When I push it up to GitHub, guess what happens? It goes up on Azure. So remember, I just pushed it to GitHub. Beat. Okay, let's see if it's on Azure. There's Azure. Let's refresh. Yay. Live. Right? That's the workflow we're talking about. GitHub, it automatically continues deployment to Azure. That's the chain that we're going to use every single time. Right? So we have our game ready to go. Whew. Okay. Next. So now that we've done that piece, right? And we deployed it to Azure and everything else is working, it's still not doing much, right? We've got type definitions. One thing I always want to check, and this is just a type definition thing, is sometimes what we used to require was also create.js. Take a look that it did look through there, create.js.lib.d.ts from tween.js. It did install that, right? And if I have a problem with any of these type definitions, I can always do a search. So I can go typings, search for create.js itself, right? Because sometimes what happens is it has additional libraries like create.js and create.js.lib that give us additional support that tie all those libraries together. I'm just putting it out there. I know it's out there because I have experience making mistakes with this stuff, and that's how it is. So let's add those two things into. So typings, install, dt tilde, right? Create.js, and then dt tilde create.js -lib. See, those are the two right here. This one and this one. These two, right? And then minus G minus S. If I don't need it, it's going to just not ignore me. Okay, it won't even do it. But it does put them in. Right? I'm never going to use these ones. They're just type definition libraries that tie the other libraries together. The preload, the tween, the create, the sound, and so it cuts down on some errors. Okay, so I've done all this stuff, and if I go back to to here, notice that I got a bunch of reference paths now, right? This is good. But, this is all in my index.d.ts file. I want to be able to reference that, but I don't want to do it by going to typings, globals, index.d.ts. I only want to do that one time. And what about if I add my own type definitions? Like if I have my own libraries, my own modules, I want to put them in there too. I know, you're looking at your watch. Who's available to stay a little longer? Anybody? If you're not, don't worry. I'm going to keep recording. All right. If you have to leave at 6:30 because you got a date, whatever, you got to eat dinner, right? Got to spend time with the family, which I do. Then, I won't exactly finish today at 6:30. Okay, so just bear with me. I want to try and get this part done so you have your like I said, we have to kind of play it by ear. So you have your boilerplate. Okay, let's take this out. So what I mean is, here's my index.d.ts, and what I want to do is inside my core. So if I go to my scripts in my core, I want to define a new file, but it's only going to be there to reference my index.t.ts file. And this is the place where I'm going to put all my personal type definitions. I'm not going to touch this file. If I want to add any new folder or libraries, I'm going to leave this alone. I'm going to leave typings to do all this work for me, right? I'm not going to touch this file. I want to have my own, right? Just in case I want to have my own libraries, right? Which I will, like a button, a label, and all that stuff, right? So I want to right-click on core, new file, and I'm going to call this reference.ts. Okay. Inside there, in my reference.ts, in my core folder, right? Notice I did that and automatically transpiled, right? Because I've got the watch task running automatically, right? I'm going to do the following. // is the syntax. I'm only going to do this for this one right now, but we're going to do it for other ones, all my own personal ones later on, right? I want to do one of those. I want to say reference path equals to, notice I'm getting an underline. It says I don't know the path yet, right? Is equal to, now we're in core, we got to go up one to scripts. I'm going to go down into typings and then down into global, or sorry, down into index.d.ts. So that's the path. So it's up one, right? So up one takes me to scripts, right? Up another takes me to my root, right? Into typings, and then into index.d.ts, and then I got to close it off. And now see the error goes away, which means I got the right path. If my error doesn't go away, I got the wrong path. I got to save this one. When I save it, it's going to transpile. That's okay. But this reference path is the one that I'm going to use to reference this reference over here. Why? So that way I only have to update this file from now on. I don't want a slew of references on the top of my file, right? That's a pain in the ass, right? I only want to reference this file, and I want to add all my references in here, right? Somewhere outside, because I don't want to clutter my file with references, right? Which I would have to do for different modules. Each module requires a reference, right? All right, whew. Let's check this out. In my game.ts, I need to reference that too. So I'm going to reference my reference file now. I know, it's a little bit of setup, but once you do this one time, you're good. Reference path is equal to, but it's easy, right? Because it's just going to be called underscore reference.ts. Yep, done. Now I never have to touch my game module itself. I never have to do this again, right? Because all I do is I'm going to change this stuff. I'm going to clutter this with my own references, right? I'm never going to change this one. I'm not going to disconnect this one, right? Because now it's connected to in here. Okay, now with this in here in place, I need to transpile, and of course I already have because I have a watch task going on, right? Here's one thing I can try now. In my init function, let's get rid of this console.log, right? And let's do a couple of things. Let's set up in the global namespace. By the way, we'll change this later on with an IFI, right? But in the global namespace, let's do a couple of things. Let's define our, I don't know, see the var let, see what happens to me. Let's define a canvas element, right? Which is of type HTML element. Here, I'm already typing HTML element, which is equal to what? A document.getElementById, right? And we're going to say canvas, right? I've linked into my canvas. I've made a reference. Well, here's, I'm going to do some type annotation. Make a reference to the canvas element. You guys may have seen this before, because I know he covered some of this. Yeah? Maybe not. All right, so this is a reference to my canvas element. And what this does with get element by ID, for those people who are not great with JavaScript, it says, hey, take a look at the document object model, find a reference to my canvas element, right? My canvas ID, an element with my canvas ID, right? And create that link, bind it to this canvas, to this variable called canvas. Okay, cool. Let's make one more. I want to get the stage going. So I'm going to say let stage then be of type create.js. Hey, look, it's create.js is coming up now. I get type code hinting. Create.js dot capital S for stage. Right. So all I'm doing here is I'm creating a reference to my stage. So create a reference to a stage container. I haven't actually instantiated my stage at this point, right? All I'm doing is telling JavaScript that the stage variable has the shape of a create.js stage. I'm not instantiating nothing yet, all right? I'm going to do that in my init function. I'm going to say, well, stage is equal to a new create.js dot stage. I'm going to pass in a reference to my canvas. Okay, so stage is my container. My container is a display list. My display list is an array list of all the objects that I want to display on my canvas. Right now, it's empty, right? Because I haven't added anything to the stage. I still need to configure a couple of issues, though. One is I want to configure my game loop. How many times do I want to refresh that stage every second, right? Like 60 frames a second is what I want to do, right? So I can do proper animation, right? So in order for me to do that, I'm going to use a static class called ticker that's part of my create.js library. create.js.ticker.set.fps. And you might say set FPS, but that's deprecated. If I go at set FPS is deprecated, it says use frame rate. Frame rate is equal to 60. This is a change that's been made lately. So my frame rate is 60 frames per second. Okay. Then what I want to do with my ticker, I want to say ticker.on. On is a fast and dirty way that's built into create.js to say add event listener. All right. .on tick, every tick, I want to launch my game loop. I don't have a game loop function yet, but I want to make it. Right. Notice that TypeScript says, hey, you don't have a game loop. By the way, JavaScript will not give you this error because it doesn't care. It says, okay, I don't know what game loop is. Well, game loop hasn't been defined. It says cannot find game loop. Let's make it. So I'm going to say function game loop turns void, right? And in my game loop, I want to stage.update. What this does is it refreshes the stage. What I mean by refresh is redraws. It redraws that stage container 60 frames a second. 60 times every second, it's going to redraw. It's almost like a dry erase board, my canvas, right? It's going to take it away and put it back. Take it away and put it back all the time, right? Okay, cool. So that's my stage, done. Still, we don't have any functionality, right? I have my initialization function. I have my create.js ticker. And now what I want to do is I want to access my main program or some kind of game, my game. And I want to call something called, I don't know, main. That's kind of a function that I don't have yet. Here's main. So call the main, the main game function. I don't have, right? Let's make it. We'll go down to the bottom, function, main, turn void. And inside there, I want to do something like this. I want to kind of put in, so it kind of initializes the stage. That's what this thing does. Creates your, instantiates the stage container, right? And this sets the frame rate. We know what that does. It's kind of self-explanatory. This creates an event listener, creates an event listener for the ticker, for the tick event. It does. And then what this does is, after that's done, it calls the main function, right? So my init function initializes stuff, then calls my main function. Meanwhile, my game loop is running in the background that's updating my stage. All right, let's add some other global variables for our test, right? We're going to make a global variable called hello label, which we're going to make of type createjs.text, right? So that's our global hello label, like a hello world, right? And what we're going to do here is we're going to say something like this. We're going to say hello label, right, is equal to a new createjs. Take care. Sorry, sorry I wasn't fast enough. I'm trying my best. Createjs.text. And createjs.text, look at the code ending we're getting now. Beautiful for createjs. All the stuff you need, right? We're getting this because of type definition, the type definition library. Typings is giving us this code hinting. We would never get this code hinting unless we use typings, right, and TypeScript. Otherwise, we would be blind. We'd have to look at the API documentation online constantly and try and figure out what's going on. Here, we can do a bunch of stuff. We can do. I can show you what Visual Studio Code allows us to do as well. Okay, so here's. It asked me for a string. What's the string I'm going to put up? Which is hello world, right? Hello world. That's kind of our hello world. A font, which we're going to use 40 pixel consoleless, let's say, and our font color, which we're going to make black, right? So it's 00, 00, 00, right? All right, cool. So that's our hello label. And now let's add in. Now that we've got our hello label, let's add it to the stage, right? So we'll say stage.addChild hello label. Okay, so what that does is first we instantiate our hello label, an object, and then we add it to the stage with the addChild. Right? And now if we did everything correctly, if I go back to my stage, oh man, what happened? How come, oh, this is the Azure websites. Oh, there's hello. So, but notice where I put it. I put it in the top left corner because the way X and Y coordinates work for computers, right, is the top left corner is 0, 0, right? And the way you count X is to the right, and Y goes down, positive values, right? But that's Y is counterintuitive. That means if I go positive Y, I'm actually going down the screen, not up the screen, right? So keep that in mind, right? So if I want to go up the screen, I got to go negative Y, up, right? Positive Y, positive X to the right, negative X to the left. That's the way I can move my screen around, right? So I want to move this to the middle of the screen. Well, we know my screen is 640 by 480. I could detect it, but for now, let's just hard code the values to make it easier, right? So how do I do that? Well, I need to measure the width of my hello world, because remember, when I do a text, this isn't real text. I can't go here and try and highlight this thing. I can't highlight this thing. This is raster text. This is pixels on the screen. This isn't a font, right? This is just pixels. I've converted my text into pixels on the canvas, right? So I can't do anything with it. I have to measure how big it is. How do I measure it? Well, I can do something like this. I can say, and I want to change my registration point. Right now, my registration point for all objects, and hear me for this one, every object in Create.js, the registration point is the top left corner, which means that's the focal point. That's the rotation point. That's the center of all my objects in the top left corner. That doesn't make any sense if I want to make my object in the middle of my screen. I want to move my registration point to the middle of my object, but I have to measure it in order to know what that middle is. This is how I do it. I say hello label .regx, my registration point on the x-axis, is equal to my hello label. Oops, let me just actually type it properly so it gives me an error. It knows that's wrong, right? Is equal to hello label get measured with, right? That's an actual function, right? Measured with, right? Times 0.5. What this is going to say is say, take the width of my label and divide it by 2. And that's now where my registration point is going to move to. So now it's not going to be the top left corner anymore. It's going to be the center on the x-axis. I want to move it down on the y-axis. So I want to do the same thing. I want to say hello label .reg y is equal to hello label .get measured height times 0.5. Why am I doing 0.5 and not dividing by 2? Because dividing by 2, it's a little bit higher on performance. It's a performance hit compared to multiplying, believe it or not. And it doesn't, regularly when we do stuff with C# and Java, it doesn't really matter. But on the web, we want to optimize as much as possible so we don't use division. We try and avoid division. We want to multiply as much as we can. Multiply by 0.5, okay, which is the same as dividing by 2. So now that we've done this, we've got our registration values. I can certainly put my label where I want it by saying something like this. Hello label.x is equal to what, right? Well, if it's 0.5, and if my screen is 640, I want to move it to 320. Let's move that to 320. And hello label.y is equal to 240. And that should put my label in the exact center of my screen. right? Let's rotate this bloody bitch. This thing is rotate it around. Okay, it's crazy. I want to rotate it around. This little bit of code here that I've got, I want to rotate it. And how do I do that? Well, remember my hello label is a global variable here, right? And inside my game loop, this is where all the fun happens. This is where all the animation happens, right? So before I update my stage, right? I want to update my stage last. I want to rotate this thing across its registration point, right? So how do I do that? I want to say something like this. I want to say hello label dot rotation, right? Dot x. I can do x or rotation in general around the middle, right? Around the registration point is plus equals to 5, which makes it so I rotate it 5 degrees to the right every frame. How many frames per second? 60 frames per second. So that means that I'm rotating it quite fast. 5 pixels, 5 degrees every frame, right? And if I see how it goes now, you can see that it's rotating quite fast, right? So I have complete control. Now notice how there's a bit of a bounce. It doesn't exactly do the middle. Why? Because text is kind of weird. It's not really an image. Images are better, right? But text kind of is, it's kind of trying to measure what the text is, especially if I change it now, like to something else, right? Instead of it being hello world, I change the text to something else. It'll rotate kind of weird, right? Like let's say if I go somewhere down here, and after I do this, I say something like, well, you know what? Change my text. So hello label dot text. Well, let's make that equal to goodbye, right? Well, stay, right? So if we do that, and well, kind of weird, right? Because it's not measured right, right? Because I measured it over here when it was hello, right? And then I changed it to goodbye, and it's the wrong size because remember it's a raster. It's not a font. It's pixels, right? So it's going to measure those pixels. So that's why it's doing that weird loop now. Because goodbye, the way I've written it, is way smaller than hello world, right? Let's undo that. Okay, cool. Let's upload that to GitHub to Azure and see if it works on there, because that's a really important thing. So I'm going to say, hey, look, we added references. I added my typings, and I also added my, kind of an example of a Create.js project. So added example Create.js code. There we go. And we're going to go up here and push it, right? And it's pushed. Beat, beat, beat. Let's see if it's enough. Go back to here, and let's say refresh. Yeah, baby. Like 3 seconds, not even, right? And it's up on Azure. So you can see this anywhere you want, right? So here's what you have access to before I stop. I'm going to stop for now, right, for the day. I'm not going to continue with this boilerplate because I can keep going, and I'm just going to burn your brain more, right? And keep burning your brain until you're like melted completely, right? And I think this has burned you enough, right? I'm guessing, right? So let's stop with this crazy boilerplate for now. We're going to enhance this boilerplate, and I was hoping to get further, but I got to cover all the bases here to make sure that everyone's got everything that you need, right? How do I do this slot machine stuff, right? Well, remember, I've got a bunch of videos on the slot machine and how to put it together. My recommendation is you find a really cool slot machine background image, right? And if you notice that in the file up online that Professor Mihai had put up, right? Let's just go up there and see it. Under Dropbox, right, you notice that assignment 3, if I go to my, oh, sorry, it wouldn't be there. It would be under content. He put it under content. If I go to assignment 3, you can see that assignment 3 has some details about what you need to do, right? All these details are the same stuff I would have given you to do, right? There's nothing different here. But here's what you need to do. You've got access to my, to my code, yeah, from my slot machine. So you have all that code, right? What I need you to do is you need to create a background image first to kind of, here's my, on number 8, it says create a slot machine graphic, right? Well, that means you need to find a slot machine graphic. Where do I find that? On the web, right? So I've done this a lot of times where I go in and kind of find some slot machine. If I go to slot machine, right? And here's a slot machine here, right? And if I want to find some images of a slot machine, right, here it is. And you can see that, and if I had worked with you on this one, we would have used TypeScript. And I haven't even put together my state machine yet, right? That's a whole other thing, right? We haven't done modules. Like there's like a lot of stuff. We talked about modules. We never put modules together, right? Lots of stuff I have to do. But I grab one of these slot machine images like this, and you clean it up with your tools, right? You kill some of this stuff that's inside the middle of these things. get your own fruit images and your text, and make sure by using the same stuff I just showed you, right, with your label, put your labels and your images in place. So when you click that button, which is just a button, you can use it so that it's a, hopefully you don't make it an HTML button. I've seen some really weird things in this class so far. Don't use an HTML button. You can make a bitmap a button. You guys were shown how to do that, yeah? And you guys are going, what is he talking about?
We were given the file, yeah.
You're given the file, but you don't know how to make it go, right?
And, well, we run it in the class.
Okay, let's move on from that. So what you need to do is you have to create a button. 628. First, what I do before I let you guys do anything and go crazy is let's move that date. I think we should move this date. So I'm going to go back to assignment 3, and let's edit that folder and go to my restrictions. And it's due today at 3:30. Yeah, no. Let's make it so that and today it ends at 3:32. That's weird. Let's change that date. So do you think Friday would be enough? I don't know. How about Monday? Okay, Monday enough? Okay, so let's make it the 11th. And let's make it by midnight to give you enough time to work on it, because we're not going to see each other for like a week, right? So we give you a little more time. Now this is going to impact some other stuff, but then I'll make it end. So if you can't get it done, you maybe need a couple more days. You'll lose like percentages every day, but I'll make it. You know, it'll be done by next Friday. Like it'll be closed, right? Now that'll be very bad, because if you try and hand it in by Friday, it'll be worth 0. Because it's 20% every day, right? 20%. So so let's just make it due like by next Monday, right? Let's say, and I think this will give you enough time to. It'll give you enough time to start working with this thing. Now we also have another one that I put together because I need to, assignment 4, which I haven't really discussed, but it's building a side scroller. But we're going to build it together. I'm going to start building up a side scroller with you next session. We get together next time. I'm going to start building a whole side scroller. I can't go over the slot machine stuff again. I can't. But I have my videos. There's tons of videos online. Please look at my site. There's tons of things I describe how to put the graphic together. Please look at those things. Lots of good videos there on how to put that together. And it'll give you a week to do it. Like there's all instructions on how to do it. It's me talking, so it's not like it's like, you know, stuff. You can always go back and forth. It's relevant to what you're doing. I don't think you're going to have a problem putting your slot machine together to make it work. With a little bit of intuition and insight, I think you can get it done. But here's what we need to do. We need to make a button work today. Right? If you don't make a button work on my page, I would feel very bad. All right? So how do we make a button? How do we make a module? And if you bear with me, I'll do that. I move the thing off. Let's do the module and the button and the class. And then people who need to go can go. People who don't need to go, I'll keep recording. And then it'll be a huge recording on YouTube. Massive. And hopefully it won't break the internet. Let's see how it goes, right? How do I do that? So one thing to note is, how do I structure my code, my scripts, in order for this to happen? And one thing that I recommend in my scripts is, I don't want to put it in my core. It's not a core functionality for my code, right? I want to separate this up. The only core thing I want to have is my game.ts file. The rest of my stuff, I want to compartmentalize and put in somewhere else. Now I used to call it objects. You can call it whatever folder you like. Objects means just general objects I'm going to use. Game objects, if you will, right? But game objects is too long, so I just tighten it to objects. So right-click, new folder, under scripts. I'm going to call this thing objects. Okay, cool. I got my objects folder. I need to add a button. I'm making a new button class. All right, so because it's easier to do this, okay? And it might, you know, resonate with you when I do it, right? For a second, right? So right-click on new file. I'm going to call this button.ts. Now, automatically, because it's watching, it's going to transport watch, right? But see, now here's the thing that's happening here. Until I'm not going to do anything yet, but I wanted to mention a couple things. One thing is this. Even though I have my button class, my button file right now, even if I put a class in here, and I will in a second, it won't work unless it's connected to my index.html and unless I've referenced it. Okay, I need to reference it inside my game.ts file, or sorry, my references.ts file. If I don't do that, it's not really connected to my project, right? Because remember, it's still an HTML file, right? I'm still running with web technologies. Web technologies, you need to tie everything together into your index.html file in the current context, in the current paradigm that we're using, okay? If we're using Node, no, you don't. But and if you're using a System.js, no, you don't, right? But we're not using System.js. We're using CommonJS, which uses this modular system that we're talking about. So first, I want to create a module. I'm just going to use the module keyword, and we're going to call it objects. I want to call the module the same name, just by convention, as my folder. Think about it as that subfolder that's inside my project, right? So my objects module, right? Objects namespace. Number one. Second thing, I want to do my class. So class, I want to export my class. You can use namespace as well, right? Export class, and I'm going to call my class button, capital B, right? In my constructor, I'm going to accept some parameters in a second, right? But here's where it gets a little hairy, and this is where the beautiful thing about TypeScript comes into play. I could certainly add in a bitmap. A bitmap is just an image, and I could create an event handler, a listener for my bitmap. So when I click on my bitmap, then my button fires, and I could have a bitmap object that's inside my button class. But what I really want to do is make my button a bitmap, which means I need to extend button. My button class will extend my create.js.bitmap class. Okay, follow me here. We're using inheritance, and this is funky, right? Let's take a look how it works. So I want to use the extends keyword. We have no time, right? Create.js.bitmap. Okay, so now, guess what? My constructor is complaining because bitmaps need certain things. I need to make a supercall, which is exactly how we would do it inside my JavaScript. And what I need is, it says I need an image or URL for my bitmap. That's what I need. So some kind of image that I'm going to pass in there. I don't have a bitmap image right now for my button, but I need one, right? And I need either that or an HTML canvas element or an HTML video element or an object or a string. It's got to be something, right? So I could tie in a string, a path to my button, which is in my assets. As an example, in my images, I could pass that path, right? So I know I'm going to have to do that. Okay. So let's just do that for now. Let's pretend we have a button in there. We don't have one right now, but I'm going to kind of now question: how do I do that? Do I have to go up one, right? And then so now I'm up at the scripts, and then I have to go up another one. So I'm at assets, right? Then I have to go down one to images. And then I'm going to down one into start button. I'll call it start button. Start button dot ping. We'll make a ping image, right? There we go. I don't have a button right now, right? But let's imagine that the button is there. Okay. So my constructor, because my button is when I say extends, it has a relationship with the create.js bitmap. Now we can treat it as a bitmap. It's not something else. It is a bitmap, right? If that's the case, then my bitmap, I can have additional functionality. Let's see what that, by the way, let's see what it emits in JavaScript. So if I look at JS, this is all the stuff it emits. Yeah, it's crazy, right? So you don't want to type this stuff. This is crazy, right? So, and that's what the extends function does. It actually runs a little function that basically extends, the functionality of my bitmap, and this is the beautiful thing that I have here. So this is nice. So I've got that, and it's going to produce the bitmap, whatever. One thing I know that I'm going to do every time is I want my buttons to be, so instead of my button to be in the top left corner with my registration point again, I want that whole same thing that I did before. I want it to be here in my class. So every time I create a button, I want to have an option. Do I want to, in my constructor, I'm going to pass this in there. I'm going to say, do you want to center or not? So I want to give my flexibility. Do I want to center my image or not? Right? True, false. Right? So I want a Boolean centered or not centered. So let's put that in there as my constructor, right? So I say is centered, and is going to be a Boolean, right? But when I create my button, it's going to ask me, do you want it centered or not, right? Well, if it's centered, if is centered is equal to true, right? Then what do I want to do? I want to use my registration point. So I'll say this keyword refers to my button class. And because it is a bitmap image, it has regx and reg-y. It has x and y coordinates because it is a bitmap, right? So therefore, I can do something like this. Regx, right, is equal to this dot get bounds. It's not get measure bounds because it's not a text. It's get bounds dot width times 0.5, and this dot reg y equals to this dot get bounds dot height. What this is doing is it's doing exactly what we did before with our text image, right? It's taking those values, width and height, and it's just centering our image only if we decide that it should be centered. So we pass that is centered into the constructor. When we make our button, when we say my button is equal to new button, true, then it's going to recenter my button wherever it is. This is something else. I want to pass in, instead of hard coding my path like this, because I want to have my buttons be different buttons, I want to be flexible enough to kind of pass in my path in here, which means my path string should be something that I pass into my constructor. So path string is my string, and I want to pass my path string into my super class constructor, right? So that's where my path string is going to go. So I get my path string, I pass it into the button, I pass it if it's centered or not. I need those things. Hey, you know what? What about x and y coordinates? Might as well do that too. Pass those in there too, right? So I'll get my x and y coordinates, right? So I'll say my x, which is a number, and y, well, that's a number 2. Maybe what I want to do is maybe put my is centered at the end, just because of a convention. I don't like my is centered being kind of in the middle like that. I want to say x and y, and then is true or false. So I'll kind of do one of those. There we go. So was my path string, what's the x and y coordinates of my button, and is it centered or not? If it's not centered, top left corner is going to be OK, right? OK, good. So now I have to assign my x and y coordinates to my x and y. Thank you for staying so long. OK, so I don't want to do it before it's centered, right? So I want to check to see if it's centered. Then I want to align it. So I'm going to say something like this dot x is equal to x. This dot y is equal to y. It knows that x and y, this x and y, are local variables. These are parameter variables that come from here. TypeScript knows that. And I know that this dot x refers to the create.js display object.x property, right? That's very common. And by the way, you could put other values in here, but it's kind of a good way of doing it. So now what I've got is I got x and y coordinates. I know where my path string is going to be, right? In my superclass, pass my superclass. What does it look like on the emitted JavaScript? It looks like this, right? So it's kind of crazy, right? But I mean, part of it's still there, right? You can see the call to the superclass right here, right? So it's there. But is it beautiful? No. Does it work? Absolutely. It's absolutely compatible across all browsers this way, right? OK, cool. So we've got our button. But I need a couple things. What about the hover event, right? I want to hover over the button. I want to get that hover happening, right? So I can do that. I can kind of bind some events to my button and all that kind of stuff too. I can add an event listener to my button, right? In fact, I can do this.on, right? Because my bitmap is a create.js object. I can do this.on instead of this. Add event listener. And I want to be able to bind my event, right? So this.on on what? Mouse over, right? I want to do something, some kind of event, right? I want to leave that blank for a second. And this.on mouse out, those are the two events. I want to do something else. So those are the two events I want to have there. And I'm doing those all in my constructor. So as soon as my object is created, I'm creating these two event listeners so I can hover over and hover out, and it'll give me my things from happening, right? Let's make these two things happen. So I want to make inside my method, I want to make two private methods. If I remember, when I do private methods, and I'll annotate this later for you guys to show you what it looks like. My private method, I want to call this thing, maybe, I don't know, mouse out or mouse over, something like that, something that makes sense to the button, or, so it's going to call this, the first one is going to be underscore mouse over, like this, return void. And now one thing to note is it's an event. So I can certainly do something like event. I can pass in an event object, which is a create.js mouse event. This is the great thing about create.js. It has a bunch of stuff bundled in, so it gives me more control. And I can look at the event.target, right? Whatever the event target is, because there will be different buttons, right? That it'll target that button, that specific button that I'm looking at, to change the opacity or the alpha, right? This .alpha, right, is equal to, when I over the mouse, over the button, I want to go to is equal to 0.7, so 70% of alpha. So it's going to be kind of faded out a little bit, right? And then in the same vein, I want to kind of do the other one, right? So mouse out, right? is going to be event.create.js, oops, which is of type create.js.mouse event, right? Returns void. And it's going to be this dot alpha, of course, is back to 1. So when I hover out, it's back to being fully opaque again, right? Now you might say this is going to be beautiful, right? This dot alpha, blah, blah, blah. And I need to fill these in. And of course, these are going to be this dot underscore mouse over. And this one is going to be this dot underscore mouse out. Now, for people who have been with me for C#, now you know why I use this all the time. Because when you use this all the time, when I program in C#, you might say, well, C# doesn't require you to use this. Absolutely not. It doesn't require you. But if you get into the habit, it works on JavaScript, right? Works on Java. Works in a lot of other language instead of this itself, right? As an example for Swift, right? So once you learn to use this all the time, right, it's explicitly telling the compiler that it belongs to this class, right? That's what I'm doing here. And there's my little button class, right? So when I hover over the stuff, I'm not going to trouble making the click event because my click event for every button is going to be slightly different, right? So therefore, I mean, I can override it. I can create it like a, and then I can override the click event. But I might as well, unless I'm doing something with the click event, I might as well just leave it as is and kind of program my click event as we go. So my mouse over and mouse out event, they're already connected to my event. Also, one thing I want to put in is pass in a reference to this. Why? Because one of the things that the on event does, it's different than an add event listener. It's an event dispatcher that passes a reference to this. So when I say this dot alpha, it works. Otherwise, when you're inside an event, it doesn't know what this means. It doesn't know. You lose the context for this. But now when I pass the context into this, then I keep the context as the class this. There is no this alpha as in the alpha that belongs to the mouse over event. I mean the alpha that belongs to the class. And I pass this in because I've passed in this event. All right, we're going to, again, comments. We're going to talk about commenting style later on. We don't have time for that, but we will do that. I've got my button, and I need to test it. One thing I know that from my in my game.ts file, to enable my button, let me go back to my game.ts file for a second, under my core. Here where I initialized my stage, and I said stage is equal to new, create.js, da-da-da. What I want to also do is I want to set up my stage enable mouse over. Because if I don't enable mouse over, and it's a method, if I don't enable mouse over, by the way, you should pass in a value like 20 frames per second. If you don't pass that in, then it doesn't do the mouse over event. It doesn't listen for any mouse over stuff. And by the way, mouse over events in general are heavy duty when it comes to you don't want them to be part of your code. If you have a game with no buttons, get rid of your mouse over. It's too heavy in terms of frame rate, right? It's a frame rate impact. So don't always put it on. I'm putting it on for now because we're doing a little button example. But you'd only put it in modules that you need it, right? And turn it off in modules that you don't. Okay. So I enabled it here. Now remember that I can put my reference. Step 2, I've created my module. Step 1. Step 2, I need to make a reference to the module. Step 3, I need to attach it to my index.html. Not in that order, right? So in my reference.ts file, here's my reference.ts file. I need to reference my new module. So here's my reference mod. I'm referencing my module. So path is equal to dot. Well, let me just check this out for a second. Hold on. So I go up 1, right? It's to core. I go up to my scripts, and then I go down into lib. Sorry, objects. I mean, and then down into button.ts. Tom. Entire Tom. Now you know that this is the path, right? So I need to go up 1 to my scripts folder, right? Because I'm in core, I go up to 1 to scripts, and then go down into objects and reference my button.ts file. I'm doing it here because I don't want to clutter here. I don't want to clutter this. I only have 1 reference in the top of my game file. All the references are going to be in my reference file. I never want to see them again, right? And inside my index.html, I need to put it in there too. Now here's a question for you smart people. Where should I put it? Should I put it below my game.js file or above my game.js file? What do you say? Above, absolutely. Why? Because it hasn't been created yet, right? So could it work below? Yes, it would. Could it cause problems? Yes, it might. So we want to avoid problems. So we put it before, right? We want to have access to all the stuff that's being created before my game.js file is created, right? So let's do that. So we'll say script, and we'll say source. Thanks, guys, for being patient. Scripts, and then we're going to go into, thank you, objects. And then it's going to be button.js, right? So now it's connected here, connected in my references, right? I have an object, and I'm missing one more thing, a button image. And no button image, you know, I got no button image, I got no nothing, right? So we can make one, we can download one. Let's make one really quickly. So I'm going to go into Fireworks. Yeah, Fireworks. Right? You can use your favorite editor, Gulp, you know, whatever you want, or so Gulp, GIMP, Illustrator, right? Whatever. I like using, you know, Fireworks. It's nice, a lightweight version of Photoshop. So I want to kind of go do a new one, and I want my button. I can decide how big my button is. Let's make my button about, I don't know, 100 pixels by about width by about 30 pixels or 40 pixels high, let's say, right? And I can play around with this. I want to make it transparent. So you see the size of the button. There it is. That's pretty small, right? It's a pretty small button. Let's make it a little larger. And again, I can go to, this is an 100% size. So modify my canvas. I want to go to my canvas size. Instead of being 100 by 40, let's make it 200 by 40, 200 by 50. Even that might be a little bit too small. There you go, 200 by 50. And my button is going to have some kind of crazy image. Let's, you know, make it so that it's an ellipse of some sort. I've kind of done this before. So I'm going to take this thing. Oh, okay, that's not exactly what I wanted. But how about this? Well, there we go. Ellipse, my button. And I don't want my ellipse to be white. Let's make it blue really quickly. Kind of, no, that's a weird color. That's like teal or something. And let's make it so it's like light blue. There we go. I don't even like that. I'm being picky now with my button colors. Okay, that's better. And you know what? Let's add a border for my button, black. I don't know, black border. Okay, it's looking pretty ugly right now. And let's add in some text for my button, right? So my text for my button that I'm going to add in is like, you know, start, right? It's pretty small text. And let's, you know, you can see this is a bitmap. Remember we talked about bitmaps? Let's make this text like 20. Okay, how about we make it large? So start like that. And you know, the good thing about this thing is it actually centers, so I can actually one of those. There we go. That's centered text. Maybe not really. Okay. By eye, Tom. By eye. There we go. And let's make this even bigger. That's not big enough for me. I like it bigger. Okay, that's better. Really big. Lots of text. Yeah. Start. Okay. There's my button. Okay, it's not pretty, it's ugly, but it's something that we can play with. We can always modify this later on. It took me 2 seconds to make, right? I'm going to save this file, save as, and we're going to put this inside my folder, right? It's under my desktop in COMP397. Oops, in COMP397, in my assets folder under images. I'm going to put this button that I'm going to call start button. Ping, save. There it is. Let's keep this open because I may need more of buttons, right? And let me go back into my my files, right? So here I am. So I've got a button, and if I want to look in my assets in my images now, I should have a ping, and I should be able to see it with Visual Studio Code. That's what my button looks like, right? So what I want to do now is I want to create a new button and pass the path string to this button, right? Now remember, I'm not using preloading yet. We'll do that next week, right? But although you can look at the videos to see how that's done, it's all up on the videos, how to do preloading and all that stuff. But let's add that into my game.ts file. So if I go to my game, so I go to core, game.ts, and inside my main, I got my hello label, and you know, let's not stop making it spin for a second, right? So no more spinning. Thank you, hello label. It's centered, and underneath my hello label, let's say at y is equal to 340 something, we'll put the button in there. And let's make our button. So first of all, we have to declare it as a global variable for now, right? We'll deal with that later on. We'll call this my start button. Is of type objects.button. It comes up, huh? We're only declaring a reference to the button, reference to our button class. That's what we're doing here. There's a reference to a button class. But down in here, the reason why I'm making it here in the global space, by the way, we'll encapsulate this global space in an IFI later on, because that way I can modify it here in my game loop later on. I can access it. If I don't make it part of my global namespace, then I can't access it anywhere else. All right? Or unless I pass it in as a parameter. So let's go to under my hello label. I want to add in a button. So I'm going to say, well, my start button is equal to a new objects.button. And we're going to kind of type in there the path string, which is a hard-coded path string, which we're going to fix later on, which is, again, because we're in core, it's up 1, up 2, assets, like we talked before, down into images, and back into the what it is, which is the start button. Bear with me, guys. I'm getting tired just like you. Got ping. And then, of course, I need other things. I need x and y values. My x value is going to be 320. And by the way, I can do one of these too. I can kind of, put it down here like this so we can see it. 320, and instead of 240, we'll make it 340. And I'll say that it does need to be centered for sure, so true. Right? That's our little button class. Right? Start button. A start button we've made, but we haven't added to the container. The container is the stage. It's a display object. Everything we add to the display object happens in order. So if I add my label first and I put my button afterwards, what happens? Button on top of the label, right? If you want the label to be on top of the button, it's got to be button below the label, which means button's got to come first. But we don't care right now because it's below the label somewhere. Shouldn't impact anything, theoretically. We'll fix that out later on. Okay, so true. And what we want to do is something like this. We want to say stage dot start button, dot add child start button. Hey, stage gets the start button. Okay, that's number 1. And now we also want to be able to click onto it. So what we're going to do, we're going to say start button dot on, because guess what? It's a bitmap. We can say on click. We want to go to start button click. We don't have that event yet, but we'll make it. We can also do it inline if you really want to, because we only maybe have it one time. But I like to make a separate event, so I'll make another function up here. We'll call this start button click. And of course, it's a mouse type event, so we'll say it's a type of event, which is a create.js dot mouse event, right? And inside my mouse event, when I click on my button, I want to do I want to change the text, change the text of my label. So hello label dot text is equal to clicked, right? All right. So actually, I have real-time effects of what the button looks like when I click my button. Poof. Hey, one thing we can do that I want to show you also with TypeScript is any kind of anonymous functions, we never have to use the keyword function anymore. We can always use arrow functions, which we'll do later on. Okay, so I've got this thing here. Huh? Yeah, we got this thing here. Here's the image. If we did everything correctly, then when I go back to my, here somewhere. Okay, not there. Stop it. If I hover over, I should get that hover effect, right? Which I did, right? Click on start button, get clicked. Get clicked, man. Button. So this is the key that you need to make your role work, right? You can create any buttons you want, as many of them as you want, across your bitmap image. Once you do that, you can attach, instead of clicked, you can attach functionality to change the reals of the images, the bitmaps on your slot machine, and that's part of the magic of making the slot machine work. Questions around this? I know it's a lot. It's a hell of a lot, right? It's not even like normal a lot. It's like crazy a lot, right? Let's upload this to GitHub because I probably went too fast. No, I'm sure I went too fast. Added button object. So click this, long, push, and beat. Not yet. Not yet. Okay. Azure websites. Okay, so we're good. So, so what are we demonstrating today? I think this is good. I know I'm burning out. I know you guys are burning out. I talked nonstop for hours, and my video recording is going to break the internet, right? So let's talk about some stuff we talked about. So modules. 3 things you need for a module. You need to somehow compartmentalize it inside of a folder somehow, right? I put it inside, I called it objects. You don't have to call it objects. You can call it whatever friendly name you want for your namespace. I recommend that with the module that you make, button as an example, the module name should match with the folder, just as a convention, right? You can make it different if you want. Button, I can always add additional objects into my objects module by redeclaring my module again and again and again. So if I declare module again, all it's going to do is add more to that namespace. Just like if I use namespace. If I namespace objects, if I keep on adding more stuff to the objects, it's almost like I'm extending that file, making it longer and longer and longer. All right. So I can put as many objects inside that inside my objects module as I want. So that's like a convention. So the first thing we do is do it here. We need to use the export keyword. We must use the export keyword if you want to expose objects outside of the module, right, to the rest of the game, right? If you don't do that, it'll be hidden there. You never have access to it. Okay, number 1. Now, you need to include it as a reference in my index.html file, right? So it has to be included, and I recommend that you include any module that you need to use in your core game class before your game is declared, right? So that it has access to it in order, right? Then inside your references, and again, I'm recording this so you can remember. In my references, I got to add my references, reference to my objects here, just to ensure the compiler knows where to find my button class. All right, so these are all the things that gives me code hinting for my stuff and everything else. And here's something that's even cooler. All right, depending on how I annotate my button, right? So my constructor has no comments. Let's add some comments. My constructor, right? I want to add in a double asterisk, and it gives me some automatic comments. I've kind of added an extension for this. So this is my look. It creates an instance of a button, puts it in there automatically. It finds my string, my number, my boolean is centered. All that stuff is ready to go. And now, if I go back to my game class, my game.ts file, and I want to add in a button. So I want to add in another button. Let's call it my button var, or sorry, let my button. I know is equal to new objects dot button. I put open. It says, hey, there's my button and objects.button. But it also what it will do if I transpile properly, if I hover over, it says creates an instance of a button, right? And it gives me all my code, all my comments from my code hinting style, right? So anything I put in there, right? If I hover over my button class and if I inspect it, there's another thing you can do with Visual Studio Code is my button, this button itself. If I want to inspect what this thing is, I mean, again, if I go to View, I can do things like I want to see that button. And you know how in Visual Studio you can actually go and inspect an object, right? Well, you can do the same thing here. If I right-click on an object, right, and if I want to peek at the definition, I can do that. I can peek at the definition and I see my button. I can see what my canvas looks like, right? So here's my start button. I can also look at the button class itself by further going into it, right? So if I go here, my button class, and I go peek definition, right here, it brings up the button class, right? So all the good functionality we get from Visual Studio, the big 80 million line code thing, right? We can get a lot of it here, right? And we're going to talk more and more about annotation. So we talked about how to make a module. We talked about how to initialize our core game, which is all this stuff. This is basic without any preloader. We're going to add a preloader next time, right? We're going to add in a state machine next time. State machine pattern is not what you guys have seen with the Impress.js thing. That is not a state machine. That is just, I wanted you to take that and then smash it up and make your own, right? But anyways, so that's some of the stuff we're doing here. And also, I want you to think about when you annotate, when you add comments, you should add comments to everything, right? So if I go ba-bam, right, I should be able to add in some comments from my method. So I'm going to, kind of at method, main, right? Here's my main method. What does it return, right? At returns, returns void, right? That's what it returns. My main method returns void, and maybe some comments about what my main method's about, like something like this method, this is the main game method, whatever. Okay. I mean, what does this do? I mean, this is the comments that I want you to put in. And where do I get this comment style from? UEDoc, right? So it's recorded so you can see this, UEDoc. If I go to UEDoc, it gives you a whole syntax about how to write comments properly. And if you use the right extensions, it'll create the entire API documentation for you, right? And create another website for you if you want, right? So here's using UEDoc, how to use it. Here's the syntax that I want you to follow. So module, main, class, element. It tells you how to comment everything in your code. This is how I want your comments to be, not a one-liner that says this is a function, right? Or this does this. This button does this. Don't do that. Give me this kind of stuff. I want to see more annotation for each of your methods. All your function headers, all your classes should have this kind of comments. By the way, I do the exact same thing with C#. Right. So if you're doing C# with me, right? Why? Because this is the way we do it. Okay, so comment style, we talked about those things, and we talked about a lot of things about getting everything working. Azure, GitHub, Bower, we almost did it all, right? Let's see if I covered everything that I said I was going to do, right? Maybe. Yeah, let's see what I said. I said Visual Studio Code, Bower, GitHub, and typings. Yeah, we did it. I also talked about it. I gave you assignment 4. But I don't have time, and it's not due week 10; it's due week 11. By the way, I made it another week up, right? Because it was too tight. The timelines were too tight. I couldn't figure out how to do it. So there's like 3 weeks you have pretty much. We're sitting at week 8, week 9, week 10, week 11 is when your side scrollers due. We're going to start doing the build for the side scroller next week. Absolutely, 100% we have to do that, right? We'll build the preloader in place. We'll put in the state machine to make it all work. Get all that stuff going. And then get you going on building up that stuff for your side scroller. You can work with a partner. I recommend it, you and a partner, because there's a lot of stuff to absorb here. So pick a partner that's really cool for your side scroller. And here's something else. You're going to be given a final project, right? And I'm going to allow you to extend your side scroller if you wish, or make something completely different, right? So let's say if you want to make, I don't know, top-down game, some kind of I don't know, tower defense game. Some kind of like platforming game, something else that you haven't made before. You can totally do it if you really want to. And one thing I don't want you to do with your side scroller is, please, whatever you do, right? I'm asking you this from the get-go. Please do not create any kind of side-scrolling card game. Okay, I don't want a card game ever again. I've had more card games than I'm choked. Card games have killed me over the years. Okay, no card games. It's like no capes. I told you before. No card games. Right? I don't want that. And we'll talk more about the side scroll and the requirements for the side scroll later. But if you look at the side scroller, it has 2 things. It has your rubric is already online, so you can see what it is. So if you actually go online, assignment 4, rubric is online, right? And when I mark your stuff, I'm going to look at stuff that he's given you. I'm going to mark as best as I can. If you've missed something, please don't get mad at me if you get a mark and you're like, how come you gave me no marks for documentation? Well, if you didn't give me documentation, you're going to get 0. It's not because I want to give you. I don't want to give anybody 0. I want everyone to be 100% in this class. But if you don't do what the assignments ask you to do, I can't give you marks for free, right? So please, if you see something that's missing in your marks, it's because you've missed something. Okay. Hopefully the rubric will help you understand, where the marks are lost. Any questions? I know, 7:05. Went over half an hour, 35 minutes. 45 minutes if you count the 10 minutes that we're supposed to leave. Right? No questions? You guys are all golden, right? Yeah, tell me.
What stuff do we have to include in our external documentation?
Do you not have an external documentation template? Let's get that external documentation template to you. Here, let me show you where it is. So it will look like, not that's for sure. Setup? No. Where did I put it? Yeah, there it is. This. What's our logo here? Please, by the way, if you get this document, please don't leave these square brackets, right? This means replace, right? Replace what's in here with your own stuff, right? Please don't leave anything in here. If you haven't included a logo, I asked you for a logo. If you don't include it, it's for 2 marks. Table of contents goes here. There's other things. If I've asked you, like, here's your version history. This is, by the way, it's an old Microsoft document for games. that we used to use, right? So it's not like it's, and people have seen it before, Kyle, like people have done game with me before, that you've seen this document before. It's not new for you, right? If you've done game programming, game programming 1, COMP305, then you've seen this document before. So why don't I do this? I will upload this document now as we speak, so don't forget, because I got a lot on my head, right? And that's one thing I got to also tell you. Lots of good stuff. I'm really excited to be here and to help out, but I got to say that I'm a busy guy, all right? So the best way to contact me and connect with me is Slack, all right? Please don't try and send me email. I get 1,000 emails a week, all right? Seriously, no joke. And I got to sift through all that, and I want to pay attention to you as students. And it's a really cool thing. It's better than texting in some ways because I can share the conversation. I could do a Hangouts with you in a second, right? If I want to connect you, forget Skype, Hangouts, boom, I'm connected to you, and we're connecting with phone. It's really cool. I can share code with you. I can do all kinds of stuff. You can share code with each other, right? Which I recommend to collaborate with. It's a great tool, and I've also enabled GitHub on the developer channel. Okay, let's go back into this. I'll put it in my assignment 4. So I'm going to edit the folder, and I'm going to add in that extra file. So I'm going to add in a file just for those people who are watching, which is under courses COMP397. Yeah, you can see all the preps. COMP397, boilerplate, external document. There we go. Okay, so you have your external document template. Next, what else? External document template, the great thing about that is you need to follow it. One thing I'm always looking for is the difference between screenshots and wireframes with your external document template. They're not the same things. Okay, please don't give me screenshots and say, this is my wireframe. A wireframe is drawn with some kind of text, some kind of graphic editor. Pick Paint, draw wireframes, boxes. Say, this is what my interface is going to look like, right? That's what I'm looking for. A very high-level sketch of what your game is going to look like. Here's my avatar, my player. He's moving this way. Here's clouds. They're moving down this way. Here's my score. Here's my lives. Here's my background. Do a little bit of drawing. Even if you were to take a napkin and draw it out by hand and take a picture of it and put it in your external document, that's good. All right, that's better than I've gotten in recent years. Okay, screenshots is when you're done making your game. Snap, take a screenshot of your game and include that in your external document as your final result. So I'm going to look at, here's my planned versus my actual. Here's what I plan to do. Here's what I actually did at the end. Okay, it's kind of your process. And your logo. Some people complain, I'm not an artist. You're asking me for a logo. I'm not going to do a logo, Tom. You need to do a logo. Logo is like, takes 2 seconds. Our friend AF here, right? He's going to put AF, circle, red, done, logo, right? I mean, what does it take? Do you need to do anything more than that? No, right? Right, Tim? You don't have to do anything crazy, right? It's that simple. So please just just make something that makes it you. If you forget to do that, if you can't do a logo, it takes you 5 minutes to do, then something's not right. And the other thing is, do you have to make it complex? No, you don't. Make it simple. Keep it simple. It's just about you, so I know it's you. It's like like I say, I call it the signet ring. You stamp your signet ring on your document, and now it's sealed in wax. I know it's you. Any other questions before I let you go? Slack. If you have a question, ask it on Slack. Direct it to me on Slack. I know it was a long session today, guys. Hopefully we'll cut it down and make it smaller and smaller, back to normal, and then we'll have that August, see what you did, that August first date that we missed, and we'll have to do something else to catch up on that one too. All right? Thank you so much, guys. I appreciate your patience. We'll see you next time. Please send me a Slack if you have a problem with your assignment number 3.